In the last week of October 1991, Caleb Monroe and Sophie Keller, newlyweds from Portland, Oregon, packed their moss-green Ford Bronco and drove north toward Montana's forested mountains. The trip was planned as a belated honeymoon. 5 days disconnected from the world in a rented log cabin nestled at the base of Glacier Ridge Nature Preserve. Caleb, 30, was an aerospace engineer with a calm demeanor and a deep passion for the wilderness. Sophie, 27, a freelance photographer, preferred cozy bookstores and small coffee shops over cold hiking trips, but agreed to the adventure, drawn by the idea of a wood-burning fireplace, handwritten letters, and absolute quiet without phones. They had been married for 3 months. The cabin they chose was remote, nearly 10 kilometers from the main forestry road, accessible only by a narrow trail winding along frozen streams and steep slopes. It was owned by Elias Crowder, a retired forest firefighter who rented it seasonally to couples or hunters willing to sign a waiver acknowledging no phone service, electricity, or immediate rescue. The cabin had no official address, just an old hand-painted wooden sign, Iron Hollow. Caleb and Sophie arrived on Monday afternoon. The last time anyone saw them was at Marley's Supply and Gas, the only open gas station in the nearby town of Cedar Pass. Grainy security footage captured them laughing, buying canned soup, a kerosene lamp, and extra wool blankets. Sophie playfully made a face at the camera as they left. That faded grainy footage later became part of every document, every case file, and every missing persons notice, because after that moment, they were never seen again. Crowder, the cabin owner, expected the couple to return the key and leave by Friday afternoon. When they didn't show, he assumed snow had blocked the trail, a common occurrence late in the season. He waited through the weekend, then drove his truck as far as the forest road allowed before hiking the rest of the way. When he reached the cabin on Monday morning, the silence was eerie. He knocked, no response. He opened the door with a spare key. Inside, the fireplace was cold. The bed was neatly made. A pot of uneaten soup sat on the stove, spoiled. Caleb's boots were by the door. Sophie's coat hung on a hook. Their luggage was still there, but they were gone. No footprints in the snow, no note left behind, no tire tracks departing, just a deafening void. Crowder reported it to the Flathead County Sheriff's Office that evening. A search began immediately. Dogs, helicopters, rangers, volunteered. Every mile of trail, stream, and ravine within a 10-mile radius of the cabin was scoured for 6 days. Nothing was found, not a scarf, not a glove, not a trace. The case made headlines across the Rockies. Newlyweds vanish in Montana wilderness became a chilling tale told far and wide. Friends and family were interviewed. Candlelight vigils were held. Sophie's sister, a Portland lawyer, offered a $10,000 reward, but no leads emerged. By early December, the case was suspended. The cabin was shuttered, and the names Caleb Monroe and Sophie Keller quietly joined the long list of unsolved wilderness disappearances, at least for the time being. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest stories. In the late winter afternoon of 2006, on an icy slope north of Iron Hollow Valley, Derek Madsen and Joel Carr, two friends, snowmobiling, swerved to avoid a jutting rock and stumbled upon a small landslide, remnants of a long-forgotten avalanche. They planned to stop only to catch their breath. But in the cracked ice, the faint afternoon light glinted off something that wasn't snow or stone. Joel dismounted first, knelt closer, and brushed away thin ice with his glove. What emerged was a corner of silver-gray metal, ice-cold, scratched, and slightly rusted. Derek leaned in, and together they dug, chunks of hard snow falling away to reveal a clearer shape. A large, weathered metal suitcase, heavy, with the initials CM hand-carved on the lid's corner. They exchanged a glance, a strange silent moment where words weren't needed to know they'd touched a piece of a story the region had tried to forget. This slope was so remote, even Montanans rarely ventured here. They'd veered off the main snowmobiling route to avoid a collapsed wooden bridge near Bear Creek, crossing an area locals called Whispering Pines for the wind's eerie whistle through the trees. The suitcase lay at the bottom of a shallow snow hollow, where the terrain had been eroded over winters. As Derek pried at the ice with a small crowbar, he realized this wasn't hunter's debris or forgotten scrap. It had double locks, steel edges dulled by time, scratches like it had been dragged across rock. They hauled it out, talking in short bursts between heavy breaths. When the latches snapped open, a stale iron and damp smell rose. Inside weren't clothes or camping gear, but decayed personal items. A thick leather-bound notebook, its cover green with mold, pages curled. A cracked metal wristwatch, a deep red wool scarf, and a few faded photos, their edges stuck together from moisture. Derek flipped through the notebook, carefully separating pages, some handwriting still legible. February 12, 1991. Snow's heavier than we thought. Firewood's wet, Sophie said. She heard something on the porch last night. I told her it's probably just branches snapping. Joel looked up, his eyes sharp with realization. Sophie Keller? He still remembered old news clippings, even the missing couple's photo on a bulletin board at a rest stop from when he was a kid. Caleb Monroe and Sophie Keller vanished in February 1991 while staying at the Iron Hollow cabin. No one saw them leave. No one found them. Until now. Derek and Joel marked the GPS coordinates and raced back to the Cedar Pass Ranger Station. Within 24 hours, the Flathead County Sheriff's Office reopened the case. Leading it was Lieutenant Nora Hensley, a rookie patrol officer when the disappearance happened, still haunted by the case's oddity. No signs of departure, no struggle, just absence. Now the metal suitcase with the initials CM had pulled the story back into the light, and with it, the first chance in 15 years to uncover the truth at Iron Hollow. Lieutenant Nora Hensley sat in the Flathead County Sheriff's Office archive room, facing a thick, yellowed file labeled Keller Monroe 1991 in faded black ink. Photos from the Iron Hollow cabin scene were spread across the table. A cold fireplace, a neatly made bed, men's boots by the door, a woman's coat on a hook, untouched luggage, but no people. Blurry Polaroids and initial reports showed the 1991 search team had combed every trail, stream, and valley within a 15-mile radius, finding no footprints in the snow, no tire marks, no trace. The case was quickly classified as a mysterious wilderness disappearance and suspended in March 1991, when winter froze all hope. Nora vividly recalled the hollow feeling of closing that file, like something vital had been left unresolved. Now, the suitcase found by Derek and Joel had opened a path back to the past 80s. Inside the moldy notebook, amid smudged pages, some entries remained legible. One read, February 14, 1991. Footprints on the porch, not ours. Sophie couldn't sleep. I told her to lock the door. I think someone's watching. The next page was blurred, with only scattered words. Don't open the door. Forensics handled the suitcase meticulously, photographing and bagging each item for the state lab. The red scarf matched Sophie's description from her last sighting at the Lone Birch gas station, where security footage captured the couple laughing, buying food and lamp oil. Nora still remembered that footage, the last moment they existed in public view. News of the suitcase spread quickly through town. Old-timers whispered old theories, from avalanches to animal attacks. But Nora was chilled by the coincidence. The suitcase was found at the edge of Whispering Pines, just 4 miles as the crow flies from the cabin, an area the 1991 team never searched due to steep terrain and dangerous snow layers. Now, physical evidence existed, and it made one thing clear. Caleb and Sophie didn't simply vanish into the snow. Someone was there with them. In the dim fluorescent light of the archive room, Nora flipped through reports, wondering how many times the stranger had passed through town, hidden in the woods, smiling because everyone had forgotten. The biting February wind stung as Nora Hensley's forensics team, 3 rangers, and the 2 seasoned searchers, Derek and Joel, stood in a circle around the metal suitcase, half buried in thick ice, at the edge of Whispering Pines ravine. The winter morning's silver-gray light glinted off its scratched surface, revealing dents and cracks from 15 years of snow's weight. Derek, who first touched it the previous morning, told Nora it took nearly an hour of gloved hands and small shovels to free it from the ice. We thought it was old snowmobile metal at first, until we saw the hinges and lock, he said. His voice tinged with unease. Nora signaled the crime scene tech to photograph every angle, the suitcase's position relative to rocks, ice cracks, the nearest pine. She knew any detail could be key, especially after a decade plus in cold storage. The ice around the suitcase was cut into blocks with a specialized handsaw to avoid vibration. When lifted, the suitcase was heavier than Nora expected. Its dull gray metal was coated in moss and residual ice. The left hinge rusted, the combination lock frozen shut. The team carried it to a thick tarp on the snow, securing it with ropes for transport to the temporary ranger station. Nora refused to open it in the wind and avalanche risk. She needed a controlled environment to preserve the evidence. On the drive back, her mind drifted to 1991. Caleb Monroe, 29, construction engineer, and Sophie Keller, 26, freelance photographer, driving their green Ford Bronco out of Cedar Grove, their smiles on the lone birch camera footage. Then, total silence. At the mobile crime scene lab, Nora stood behind glass as forensic tech. Lena Rowe, gloved and goggled, cleaned the lock. Scratches suggested someone had tried forcing it open, but fine dust in the lock's crevices indicated it hadn't been opened since its final closure. Lena cut the lock with a specialized tool, the metal screeching softly. When the lid popped open, a damp, moldy chill wafted out, the smell of time locked away too long. On top was a deep red wool scarf, still rough with hand-woven texture, its edges faded and torn near the hem. Beneath it, a brown leather notebook, white molded corners, pages stuck together, but some still legible. Lena carefully opened to a clear page, reading slowly. February 14, 1991. Footprints on the porch, not ours. Sophie said she saw a shadow through the door crack. I told her to lock the door. Night's quiet, but the feeling won't stop. Nora scribbled every word, her heart slowing as if reading Caleb's final testimony. Under the notebook, a Canon AE-1 film camera. Its leather case cracked, held an unprocessed roll. Lena sealed it in a moisture-proof box. Next, a pair of small gray wool gloves with long brown hairs caught in the cuffs. Nora knew Sophie's hair matched. At the bottom, a clear plastic envelope held a map of Iron Hollow, red-marked trails, and a repeated symbol, a circle with a cross inside. Nora had never seen it in the old files, and it sent a chill through her. A private code from whoever reached the cabin that year. Outside, Derek and Joel waited, eyes fixed on the glass room. When Nora emerged, she said only, "It holds more than we expected. And it all says they didn't leave the cabin naturally." Joel stayed silent. Derek nodded slightly, unsurprised, as if he'd sensed it from the moment he saw the suitcase in the ice. The next day, as faint sunlight pierced thick clouds, the forensics team returned to Whispering Pines to scan the area. A ground-penetrating radar, deployed for 40 minutes, detected an anomaly 6 meters away, 1.5 meters deep in ice and rock. Nora ordered a test drill. As ice chips cleared, a moss-green fabric emerged, then a high-top boot, laces intact but empty inside. The team froze, the air thick. The suitcase was no longer the only evidence, it was a marker to the rest of a buried story. Nora knew this was no longer a vague missing persons case. It was a crime scene, marked 15 years ago, by someone she would track to the end. News of the suitcase and boot spread through Cedar Grove and neighboring towns. The next morning, the Westmore County Sheriff's Office held a press conference at the temporary Whispering Pines Ranger Station. Under a lead-gray sky, wind whistling through pines, Nora stood before reporters, a topographic map of Iron Hollow behind her, studded with red pins marking new search points. "We are officially reopening the 1991 disappearance case of Caleb Monroe and Sophie Keller. New evidence with legal weight has been collected," she said, her voice firm, but cautious, worn by years of eroded cases. Inside the command tent, an interdisciplinary team was ready. County detectives, an FBI agent specializing in cold cases, a state lab forensic expert, and a military cartographer. The initial goal, trace the events leading to the suitcase's burial, and find any remains of Caleb and Sophie. The suitcase, notebook, camera, gloves and map were sent to the Cheyenne lab within 12 hours of unlocking. Lena Rowe's preliminary report, the hairs in the gloves, likely belonged to Sophie, based on DNA from a hairbrush her mother submitted in 1992. The camera's film, partially damaged, might yield a few images. The map's red-marked trails were known only to those familiar with the terrain. Many weren't on public maps. Nora frowned, recalling the cabin's proximity to an old trail maintained by a small Forestry Service contract crew in the late 80s and early 90s. The first name she thought of was Roy Halberd, a trail maintenance worker who quit in 1992 after an internal issue. His personnel file noted unsuitability for remote work without elaboration. Back then, Roy lived in an old trailer outside Elkford, 40 miles from Iron Hollow. When Nora mentioned him, FBI agent Jim Kearns nodded. We heard of him in a 1994 disappearance, but no evidence connected him. The team split into two, one scanning the suitcase area with radar and dogs, the other reviewing 1991 Iron Hollow residents and workers. Lena analyzed fingerprints on the suitcase, finding Caleb's and an unknown set, not matching any known associates or the cabin owner. That afternoon, a 1990s witness emerged, Martha Gibbons, 72, former Lone Birch store owner. She recalled a tall, lanky man with shoulder-length hair in a dark green parka, buying coffee and flashlight batteries on February 15, 1991. Constantly watching the window like he was keeping an eye on someone. Shown a 1990 photo of Roy Halberd, she said. Very similar, especially the eyes, but couldn't confirm. Meanwhile, the field team found another item 15 meters from the suitcase, a rusted, curved metal piece, possibly from a fuel canister, bearing the same circle cross symbol as the map. Kearns noted, if this is a personal mark, he left it on paper and at the scene. This wasn't random. The next day, the Canon film was processed. Of 24 salvaged frames, 19 were winter landscapes, snow, pines, frozen streams. The last 3 silenced the lab, interior cabin shots. One showed Sophie at a wooden table, holding tea, her face tense, listening. Another showed Caleb at the window, staring out, snowlight on his face. The final, blurry shot, seemingly taken outside through glass, showed both turning toward something, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, startled. Nora stared at the final photo for a long time. She recalled Caleb's journal entry, footprints on the porch. Sophie said she saw a shadow through the door crack. If these photos were taken by the same person holding the camera, it meant someone was inside or right outside the cabin before they vanished. The mounting evidence pointed to a single individual who knew the terrain, the cabin's history, and was in the area at the exact time. But with 15 years gone, physical traces were elusive. So, Nora decided the next step was to dig through all Forestry Service trail maintenance records from 1989, 1993, searching for any mention of Iron Hollow and nearby trails. If Roy, or someone like him, had signed a work log, it could be the only thread linking the present to the night of the disappearance. As evening fell over Whispering Pines, wind lashed the command tent's walls. Nora sat alone with stacks of files, placing the final photo of Sophie and Caleb beside the map with red circles. Her eyes lingered on a symbol near the map's eastern edge, an old trail leading to a cabin abandoned since 1985. A hunch stirred. If the suspect had returned to the scene multiple times, as the clues suggested, he might still have a hideout nearby. And if so, this 15-year cat-and-mouse game might have just restarted. The next morning, Nora brought the map with the red circle on the eastern edge to FBI agent Jim Kearns' desk. "Remember the abandoned cabin at the end of Dry Creek Trail?" she asked. Kearns studied the map, frowning. "The one left since the mid-'80s after the Smoke Tower fire? I thought it collapsed." Nora tapped the faint circle and cross symbol on the metal piece found near the suitcase. Same location. If this is his mark, he might have used or still uses that place. Kearns immediately requested the latest satellite imagery. Though low resolution, it showed compacted snow around the old cabin's foundation, as if someone had been walking there regularly. To avoid tipping him off, Nora's team opted for remote scouting first. 2 operatives in white camouflage, equipped with infrared binoculars, approached the area at night. At 2:17 a.m., they radioed about a faint light from the cabin's foundation, like a shielded oil lamp's glow. They also spotted a single set of size 11 boot prints, slightly limping, leading from the trail. This triggered Nora's memory of Martha Gibbons' description of the tall, lanky man with long hair and a parka, who stood in her store, watching outside, as if guarding something. The next morning, when scouts returned, snow had covered the prints. But near the north foundation wall, they found a small item, a folded piece of old newspaper containing a scrawled note. "They came, but don't know yet." The handwriting matched the notebook from the suitcase, nearly confirming the theory. The suspect was still around Iron Hollow, closely monitoring the investigation. Nora reopened Roy Halberd's personnel file. A previously overlooked note caught her eye on February 14, 1991. Roy reported checking a side trail near Dry Creek, though he wasn't assigned there that day. In a vague statement, He wrote about hearing noises and checking a water source. 3 days later, Caleb and Sophie vanished. When the FBI re-interviewed former forestry workers from that era, one, Walter Briggs, recalled a late winter afternoon in 1991, seeing Roy standing motionless at the forest's edge, 200 meters from the Dry Creek cabin, holding binoculars. I called out, but he just turned, smiled, and walked into the woods. That smile, I never forgot it, Briggs said. Using this, Nora and Kearns mapped a possible route for the suspect on the night Caleb and Sophie disappeared. The trail from Dry Creek to Iron Hollow could be walked in under an hour, especially by someone familiar with the terrain. If Roy had been watching the couple, he could move between the 2 points undetected, especially in winter's low traffic. That afternoon, forensics confirmed the unknown fingerprints on the suitcase matched a 1984 state police file for Roy Halbert, charged with trespassing on private property in rural Sweetwater, Wyoming, though the case was dropped for lack of evidence. This was a breakthrough. For the first time in 15 years, they had a name directly tied to physical evidence. The FBI added Roy to an internal wanted list and opened a federal file, naming him the prime suspect. But a big question remained: was Roy still alive, and if so, where was he? That night, Nora didn't sleep. She sat in the command tent, rereading Caleb's journal, the salvaged photos, and the new note. She pictured a figure moving silently in the dark, knowing every shortcut, every wind's howl through the ravines. Someone patient enough to wait out entire winters, then vanish before anyone noticed. Before dawn, Nora decided, expand the search radius 5 miles northeast, covering all of Dry Creek and connecting side trails to Iron Hollow. If he used the abandoned cabin as a hideout, there'll be traces, supplies, fire marks, maybe a temporary tunnel, she told the team. As the search party set out, snow began falling heavily, but for Nora, the weather wasn't just an obstacle, it was an opportunity. He thinks snow erases tracks, but we'll search while they're fresh, she said, voice resolute. This time, she believed they weren't just chasing a ghost from the past, but a living presence, watching, and possibly ready to strike again if not stopped soon. On the third afternoon of the expanded search, Nora's team ventured deep into a narrow ravine northeast of Dry Creek. Snow fell, but the wind had eased, creating a stillness that let seasoned ears catch unusual sounds. Lead operative Mark Ivers halted, signaling silence. Amid the wind's hiss through rocky gaps, another sound emerged, steady creaking, like a wooden door pushed by the breeze. A few steps forward revealed, among old pines, a small structure nearly swallowed by the terrain, a low-slung shack, dark wood walls, roof barely eye-level. Thick snow blanketed the roof, but the porch showed patchy snow, as if recently cleared. Nora signaled the team to fan out, forming a perimeter, then approached with Kearns. The front door was ajar, unlocked, with a single set of large boot prints circling the steps, suggesting minimal visitors. No chimney smoke, but he might use an oil stove, Kearns whispered. Nora took a breath, nudging the door open. A cold mix of rotting wood, kerosene, and faint dried meat hit them. Inside, dim light filtered through gaps in rough curtains. The shack, about 10 square meters, was oddly arranged, a foldable cot in one corner with a worn wool blanket, a low wooden table covered with a topographic map, marked with red circles, matching the suitcases. Against a wall, a makeshift shelf held glass jars of salted meat and wax paper-wrapped crackers. What chilled Nora was the wall opposite the door, covered in Polaroid photos, most taken from a distance, half hidden by foliage or shadows. She recognized Caleb and Sophie's faces, plus others from missing persons files. Some were clearly shot at night, firelight flickering in unaware eyes. Centered, carefully nailed, was a photo of Caleb and Sophie outside Iron Hollow, eyes vacant, poses stiff, as if staged. On the table, beside the map, sat a large tin box, locked with twisted wire. Kearns cut it open, revealing short handwritten notes in blocky scrawl. They arrived 12th, not going anywhere. Wait for dark, third night, lamp still on. Girl crying. Keep quiet, left there. These matched Caleb's journal timeline. As Kearns flipped another page, Nora spotted a small chest under the cot. She pulled it out. Dust clouding. Inside were women's clothes, sweaters, scarves, all old and moldy, some caked with dried mud. A red scarf stood out, its color and pattern matching the one Sophie wore in the gas station photo. Just then, Mark rushed in, whispering urgently, fresh boot prints nearby, heading east toward the slope. The team split. One group secured evidence, the other followed the tracks. Nora stayed, photographing every detail. She knew this wasn't a permanent home. Everything was minimal, portable, ready to abandon. But the photos, items, and notes showed the shack was an observation post, a storage hub, before moving prey or evidence elsewhere. In a corner, Kearns found a homemade shortwave radio, wired with copper and a small solar battery. Testing it, they heard their team's frequency. "He's heard everything we've said," Kearns muttered. Outside, the radio crackled. The tracking team lost the prints on a slick slope, wind erasing them. Nora gripped her backpack, sensing the chance slipping. But with what they'd found, they were closer than ever to piecing this mystery together. Before leaving, Nora photographed the map's red circles and every wall photo. Half weren't in any files, suggesting unreported or unlinked disappearances. Stepping out, as snow thickened, hiding their tracks, Nora glanced back at the low wooden door, feeling it silently close, swallowing secrets only the suspect fully knew. In her mind, one thought rang clear: he's out there, and he knows we found this place. Nora stood at the forest's edge, snowflakes stinging her face, feeling the air heavier than usual, as if someone watched from afar, hidden among dark trees. They'd left the hidden shack, taking the map, photos, and evidence. But Nora was certain the owner hadn't gone far. He wasn't the type to flee to safety and disappear. No, he clung to this land like a limb, living and breathing it, blending in so well that even meters away, they wouldn't see him. The map's red circles were proof, dozens of points across the forest, each in places so isolated, no one would stumble there without intent. This showed he'd roamed the area for decades, knowing every trail, rock hollow, and spot where snow melted slower or piled deeper. Back at the field command post, Nora ordered immediate analysis of the map's marked points. A GIS team mapped them, numbering each circle and cross-referencing with disappearances over 3 decades. The result silenced the room. At least 11 unsolved vanishings occurred within a 15-mile radius of the marked points, most in late-year months, matching Caleb and Sophie's time. This solidified Nora's initial theory: he operated cyclically, choosing winter or near winter, when cold and snow isolated victims, making searches harder. Kearns, still frustrated over losing the fresh tracks, suggested, if he's hearing our comms, he knows our every move. We can't use old methods. We need to blind him. Nora agreed, switching to encrypted satellite comms, accessible to only a few. She also proposed deploying thermal cameras in a wider radius, moved randomly to avoid detection. That night, reviewing the shack's Polaroids, Nora noticed a detail that chilled her blood. In one photo's corner, shot from afar, targeting a couple by a stream, a faint reflection in the water showed another figure. Broad-shouldered, face obscured by a hood, the figure's slanted posture and camera grip matched the suspect's other photos. This proved he didn't just watch from a distance, he sometimes closed in dangerously close, where a turn of the head could have revealed him. The next morning, a drone team reported new data. A thermal camera caught a heat signature moving slowly among cedars near Elk Hollow at 3 a.m. The figure, about 6'1", moved with long strides, pausing to listen. Notably, it was just 2.5 miles from the shack. Nora sent a team, but by dawn, they found only a temporary campsite, a nylon tarp, half-burned firewood, and drag marks of a large boxy object. Kearns guessed it was a portable storage box, possibly for evidence or victims' items. The drag marks vanished at a patchy ice patch by a cliff, where wind and snow erased further traces. Nora grew certain he hadn't left the forest, but was moving between nests, temporary hideouts prepped for use. That evening, Nora briefed 3 team members on a plan. They'd set up decoy points, empty cabins with human-scented items like fresh blankets, coffee mugs, and a radio playing fake chatter to lure him. She believed his predator instinct would drive him to check any sign of intrusion into his territory. The next day, 2 decoys were set, one at Elk Hollow's north edge, another at Willow's Gap's entrance. Both had hidden infrared cameras and audio recorders. For 48 hours, nothing. But on the third night, a Willow's Gap camera caught a tall figure standing motionless at the light's edge, staring at the cabin for 11 minutes before vanishing into the dark. The chilling discovery came morning. At the decoy cabin's doorstep was a small pine branch tied with red string, a note inside. "I'm still here." The scrawl matched the tin box notes. Nora held the note, feeling he was nearby, watching their reaction. She knew, No matter how many devices they used, timing was key, catching him during direct contact with a target. More crucially, she realized a cold truth: he'd never left this forest, nor planned to. He'd made these wild miles his home, his playground, and the prison for those unlucky enough to cross his path. As night fell and snow continued, Nora gazed at the dense tree canopy, wondering if he was there, in the silent shadows, listening to their every sound, as he had for years. She knew this hunt was just beginning. A day after the "I'm still here" note, Nora summoned the tech team to the command tent. She placed the note and pine branch on the table, looking at Kearns. "If he's bold enough to approach the decoy, he knows our every move. We need to know where he is before he gets close." Kearns nodded, calling in FBI electronic surveillance experts with gear Nora had never seen used in snow-covered wilderness. Most notable was a microseismic sensor system, each unit coin-sized, detecting human footsteps up to 30 meters through snow and soft soil. Camouflaged as rocks or broken branches, they sent real-time encrypted signals to a central hub. Nora ordered a sensor ring around suspected nests, the hidden shack, El Calo, and areas with the most red circles. Additionally, the tech team deployed high-resolution infrared drones, not on fixed routes, but triggered by seismic sensors. Any unusual movement sent the nearest drone instantly. Kearns explained, "He can dodge fixed cameras, but he can't predict when one appears overhead." While techs worked, Nora re-examined the Polaroids. A new detail emerged in 4 photos of different cabins, the angle tilted 5-7 degrees right, as if the photographer had a consistent habit. Compared to Caleb and Sophie's Iron Hollow photos, the tilt matched perfectly. This convinced Nora that all vanishings in the forest over 30 years were one person's work. 3 days later, at 2:43 a.m., a seismic sensor near El Calo pinged. The map showed a red dot moving slowly north. A drone launched from the nearest post, its infrared capturing a clear image: a tall figure in a dark parka, a boxy object on his shoulder, walking steadily through snow. He paused twice, crouching as if checking the ground, then continued. Kearns zoomed in, pointing out a detail that silenced the room: a small antenna on the parka's shoulder, used for amateur radio or rescue frequencies. "No doubt, he's listening to us," Kearns said. The antenna was rare, compatible with only a few radio models, including one sold by a single Great Falls store in the late 90s. Nora contacted the store. After a day of digging, the owner found a handwritten receipt from January 6, 1999, for a radio and antenna sold to Roy Halberd, listing a P.O. box in Elkford, where Roy lived in his old trailer. This tech clue opened a new path. If Roy still used that radio, they could identify his frequency and set a reverse tracking trap to pinpoint his signal when activated. The tech team set up a bait system, broadcasting fake chatter about moving forces to a specific point, forcing him to listen. The next night, it worked. 15 minutes after the fake chatter aired, an audio sensor caught a signal from Willow's Gap's west slope. A drone arrived, capturing a clearer image: Roy Halberd, or someone matching his build, standing alone on a rocky outcrop, ear to radio, eyes scanning the valley, as if watching something. Nora felt her heart pound. She knew they were close, not just to a shadowy figure moving through the forest, but to a real flesh-and-blood person, still alive, still hunting. But she also knew catching him here wouldn't be easy. He knew the terrain, every escape route, and had spent years perfecting the art of staying unseen. She turned to Kearns. "We can't just rush in. We need him to think he's still in control, until we cut off every path." Kearns nodded. As snow continued to fall outside, the plan to hunt the hunter took shape. This time with their strongest weapons yet, technology and time, things he'd controlled for the past 15 years. Using the frequency and coordinate data from the Willow's Gap night, Nora and the tech team began reconstructing Roy Halberd's movements over the past 2 weeks. The red dots, each marking a radio signal, formed a closed arc around the northeastern Black Pines Range. What caught Nora's eye was a gap in the arc, near a deep ravine, with no signals at all. "If he's hiding something important, he'd put it where he doesn't need to use the radio," Nora said, tapping the map. Kearns got it instantly. The blank spot could be his long-term base, where he kept his most critical items, leaving no electronic trace. The next morning, they deployed a 3-person scout team with 2 infrared drones, approaching from 3 directions to avoid trails. The target area was treacherous, sheer cliffs to the west, dense cedar forest to the east, and a slick ice band to the south that only someone intimately familiar with the terrain would dare cross. As the second drone circled the ravine's edge, its feed silenced the control room. Nestled in thick woods under snow-laden trees was a structure larger than any shack they'd found. It wasn't a makeshift scrapwood shelter. This was a solid log house, with a steep roof, twin chimneys, and a 5-meter metal antenna nearby. Surrounding it were white tarps stretched over wooden frames, camouflaged as snow, likely hiding supplies or side paths. Notably, no trails led to it, meaning access was through virgin forest or down the cliffs. Nora launched Operation Headquarters, a direct strike on what they believed was Roy Halberd's central hub. The force included 8 FBI agents, 2 federal operatives, a lock specialist, and the tech team. The plan approached silently, disable any warning systems, and breach simultaneously. They moved at 4 a.m., light snow falling, wind whistling through trees. The team stepped carefully on fresh snow to avoid exposing old tracks. At 100 meters out, an infrared binoculars operative signaled, "No heat signatures inside." Nora frowned. "He's either out or in an insulated basement." The go-ahead was given. 2 operatives flanked left, targeting the chimneys and antenna, while the main group hit the front door. The lock specialist cracked the old, but reinforced double steel lock in under a minute. The door swung open, releasing a cold blast of mold and old firewood smoke. Inside was a museum of disappearances. 3 walls were covered in photos, Polaroids, color prints, faded black and whites, all of couples in forests, cabins by streams. Each had a date. Many marked "stayed" in red pen. Below each cluster were small items, watches, scarves, keychains, even old train tickets. In a corner, Nora saw a desk piled with topographic maps, wires, a printer, and a scanner beside a generator and spare batteries. A wooden box, partially open, held dozens of unprocessed film rolls and old memory cards. A drawer contained leather notebooks, filled with block letter descriptions of targets, dates met, weather, daily habits, right moments. The biggest find was a steel door at the room's end, locked with a code. The specialist took over 5 minutes to crack it. When it opened, a narrow staircase led to a basement. The air grew heavier with damp. Flashlights revealed a 10-meter-long space, low-ceilinged, wood-paneled. Iron shelves lined both sides, holding large metal crates, some with old military seals, others labeled tools or EQU. Center stage was a massive metal suitcase, scratched and dented, but locked tight. Its lid bore 3 carved initials, M and J. Nora froze for seconds. Those matched Mark and Julia Carter, a couple missing since 1991. Kearns signaled the tech to photograph and scan before touching it. When opened, the team held their breath. Inside were winter clothes, a photo album, a moldy journal, and 2 wedding rings tied with wire. The journal's smudged pages were still legible in parts. Day 3, thick snow, strong wind. She said she heard someone at the door. I didn't open. The next line, in red pen, stayed. Nora realized this suitcase wasn't just evidence, it was a trophy Roy had kept for 15 years. As the team finished collecting, Nora looked around the basement. Everything. The organization notes, preserved items, showed this was Roy's headquarters for planning, storing, and reliving his hunts. But it also told another story. He'd never stopped playing, and with the supplies, power, and information here, he could continue for years. Nora ordered the area sealed, the suitcase and crates shipped to the FBI lab. As the team left the log house, snow fell heavier. She knew that while they'd found his headquarters, they hadn't caught him. And for someone who'd lived a lifetime hidden in these woods, this blow might make him more dangerous. Stepping out, Nora tightened her collar, eyes on the dark forest ahead. Somewhere out there, Roy Halberd knew they'd found his lair, and was planning his next move. On the way back from Roy Halberd's headquarters, the massive suitcase and metal crates were sealed in a specialized truck. Nora couldn't take her eyes off a small item forensic tech Lena Rowe had bagged separately, a scratched black plastic cassette recorder, labeled Night, February 14, 91. Seeing the date in the basement, Nora had ordered absolute preservation. If it worked, this could be the only audio from Caleb and Sophie's final night. At the field lab, Lena and FBI audio specialist Darren Cole processed the tape. Its 15 years in a cold, damp basement had left it moldy and fragile, so Darren cleaned each loop by hand, then digitized it with specialized equipment. Nora, Kearns, and key team members sat around a table, the screen showing a frail audio waveform like an EKG. The audio started with howling wind and creaking wood, classic winter cabin sounds. Then Caleb's voice, distant from the mic, winds picking up door locked. A softer female voice, clearly Sophie, replied, "Yes. But, you hear that?" A few seconds of silence, then faint steps on the porch. Caleb, low, "Might be a branch. Go to sleep." A minute later, the sound returned, clearer, slow, steady footsteps pacing outside the door. Sophie, breathless, whispered, "That's not a branch, someone's out there." Caleb's quick steps toward the door, then a pause, a soft click, like someone testing the doorknob from outside. For 30 seconds, only wind. Then a sound froze the lab, a low male voice, humming a strange wordless melody, 4 notes, right by the mic, as if next to the cabin wall. The slow, steady tune lasted 4 beats, then stopped. Sophie, near tears. "Honey." Caleb, urgent, "Get back into the bedroom." The tape caught heavy steps circling the cabin, snow falling from the roof, as someone brushed the wall, and again, the doorknob rattled hard. Then a loud thud against the wall, shaking the mic. Caleb shouted, "Get out of here." No response. Just silence, then the melody again, closer, clearer, right by the door. Suddenly, the audio wavered. Darren explained the recorder was moved. Caleb's heavy breathing, Sophie's sobs, then an odd sound, a long scrape on wood, mixed with soft metallic clinks. Then silence, stretched nearly a minute before the tape ended abruptly, with a door opening and wind rushing in. When the recording stopped, no one spoke. Nora leaned back, eyes fixed on the waveform. "That melody, he's leaving his mark," she said slowly. Lena nodded, "And it appears twice, at different distances. He circled the cabin, letting them know he was there, but didn't show himself right away." Kearns leaned toward Darren. "Can you filter noise to pinpoint the voice's distance or direction?" Darren replied. "Possible, but it'll take days to analyze echo and wind frequency." Nora knew every hour mattered, but this tape was key. It captured Caleb and Sophie's final moments and revealed part of Roy Halberd's psyche, a predator who toyed with his victims' fear, letting them know they were watched, using silence as a weapon. Before leaving, Nora ordered multiple backups of the tape, stored with both the FBI and county police. She also sent a copy to a federal criminal profiler. "I want his behavioral profile complete before we move forward. That song wasn't random. It's his signature, and it'll lead us closer." Stepping out of the command tent, snow fell thick, wind whistling through pines. Nora pulled up her collar, the tape's 4-note melody echoing in her mind. 4 notes like the breath of someone still out there, waiting for his next chance. Nora stood in the command tent, her hand unconsciously touching her earpiece as the 4-note melody from the tape lingered. She knew Roy Halberd wasn't just a killer hiding in the woods. He was a patient predator, crafting games, drawing victims into fear before striking. To end this, she couldn't wait for his mistake. She had to make him reveal himself. But Roy wouldn't emerge unless he believed he held the upper hand. The trap had to be perfect, making him think this was a new hunt, like with Caleb and Sophie in 1991. Nora opened the area map, tracing the narrow mountain corridor from North Timber Pass to Hollow Creek. It was a rarely visited winter area, dotted with abandoned cabins from the 70s and 80s, like matchboxes in the pines. Crucially, it was under 5 miles from the red map points found in Roy's basement, within his hunting range. "We'll build a new cabin here," Nora said, marking a blank spot. Not actually new, just a weathered wooden frame, minimal interior, but from outside, it must look like an old cabin rented by locals. And inside, she glanced at the tech, full of cameras, audio, motion sensors, thermal sensors. Captain Kearns frowned. "You're putting people in there?" Nora nodded. "A couple. Natural, intimate, no visible weapons. He's targeted couples like this for 30 years. We'll make him think it's another chance." Kearns sighed. "This is a double-edged sword, Nora." "I know," she replied, voice firm. "But Halberd's closer than ever. We can't let anyone else vanish." 3 days later, the FBI tech team and local builders secretly hauled materials by snowmobile. An old-style wooden cabin was built in 2 days, deliberately weathered with peeling paint and fake age marks to look decades old. Inside, mini cameras hid behind vents, oil lamps, and picture frames. High-sensitivity mics were embedded in wooden beams. 360-degree thermal sensors were buried in a 50-meter radius. Data fed to the command tent via fiber optic cables buried under snow, disguised as routes. The night before the tenants arrived, Nora personally checked each camera. Every angle covered the entrance, windows, porch, and rear forest. Only when satisfied did she greenlight the bait. The chosen operatives were Daniel Price and Maya Lewis, a real married couple, seasoned in undercover and wilderness survival. Trained in crisis response, they used subtle gestures and sounds to signal danger without drawing attention. That morning, Daniel and Maya were driven by snowmobile to the cabin, carrying luggage and supplies like any couple on a winter retreat. Cameras caught them laughing, opening the door, lighting a fire, hanging coats, all natural. To anyone watching from afar, they were just a couple enjoying a quiet getaway. Nora and the surveillance team watched screens in the command tent. The first day passed calmly. Daniel and Maya walked the forest, leaving fresh tracks in the snow, signs Nora hoped Roy would notice. At night, they ate dinner, read by the fireplace, letting the oil lamp cast golden light through the window, just like Caleb and Sophie in 1991. On the second night, at 2:17 a.m., a northern thermal sensor pinged. A heat source moved slowly down the hillside, stopping 80 meters from the cabin. Infrared cameras showed a tall figure in a thick coat, hood up, blending into the trees. "Everyone quiet," Nora signaled. The figure stood still for ages, then circled west, stopping at 60 meters. Daniel and Maya kept acting normal, chatting, sipping tea. A camera caught a small flash from the dark, like a camera lens reflection. Roy was photographing them. On the third night, the heat source appeared earlier, at 1:38 a.m., closer, just 20 meters from the porch. Maya, playing a new Sophie, stepped out to dump fireplace ash, her silhouette lit by the lamp. The figure froze, then slowly retreated into the dark. "He's testing," Nora whispered. "He wants to be sure before playing." On the fourth night, the trap tightened. Nora sent a quick response team to within 200 meters, hiding in snow dugouts. Drones flew high above the canopy, infrared sweeping. At 2:56 a.m., Roy appeared from the south, a route he hadn't used before. He approached the right window, close enough for a mini camera in the wood frame to catch half his face under the hood. He stood, just watching. Then, he whistled, the same four-note melody from the 1991 tape. Nora gripped her earpiece, heart racing. "Prepare," she ordered. But as the response team moved in, Roy turned, retreating into the dark. Thermal sensors lost him. Drones saw him vanish under thick tree cover, where falling snow hid his tracks. He sensed it, Kearns gritted. "Not quite," Nora replied. "He wants to stretch the game. He'll be back." On the fifth night, the cabin was silent until nearly 4 a.m. Then a click sounded from the porch. Cameras caught an old tin box, placed neatly at the door. Daniel retrieved it, setting it on the table as scripted. Inside was a Polaroid of Daniel and Maya, taken in a different forest spot, clearly days before the mission began. With it were two long hairs, tied with red thread, and a note. "They always come, then stay." Maya glanced at Daniel, eyes tense, but staying in character. In the command tent, Nora knew what it meant. Roy had watched the cabin's construction, and was here before they arrived. He hadn't fallen for the trap as they thought. "We're not hunting him," Nora thought. "We're in his hunt," but she also knew once Roy entered this game, he wouldn't stop. And that's when the real trap would close. The story of Caleb Monroe and Sophie Keller's disappearance, and the 15-year pursuit of suspect Roy Halberd, isn't just a gripping investigation, it reflects personal and community safety issues in America today. In the story, Roy, a master of terrain, used the mountain's isolation, radio technology, and victims' habits to make the wilderness his domain. Details like the four-note melody tape, the red circle map, or his approach to the bait cabin while escaping show a reality. In remote areas, preparation and risk awareness are critical. In modern America, despite advanced infrastructure and surveillance, isolated places, mountains, deserts, sparse suburbs, still carry similar dangers. Missing persons cases during hiking, camping, or at remote rentals aren't rare. The story's biggest lesson: never underestimate your surroundings or who might be watching. Leaving a trail of where you are, who you're with, and when you'll return is vital. Technology like personal GPS, emergency beacons, or real-time location sharing with loved ones can be a critical safety net. Communities must stay connected, sharing info on suspicious behavior, as Nora's team did with multiple clues. Vigilance shouldn't just follow incidents, it must be daily habit. As the story shows, someone like Roy Halberd can persist for decades, and one moment of inattention can change everything forever. If you want to keep following the hunt for predators like Roy Halberd, hit subscribe to stay updated on the next stories. Thanks for joining us. See you in the next video with even more haunting mysteries.